And Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is also in New York, where he'll be participating in the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The president was received by Professor Tijani Muhammad Bande, who is Nigeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tugara. While in the United States, President Tinubu is expected to hold several bilateral meetings on the sideline of the UN General Assembly, and also further push his agenda to attract more foreign investments into Nigeria. The president will address the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, and he is also expected to meet with the New York Chambers of Commerce, where he will ring the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange. But joining me now from New York for development around the UN General Assembly is the CEO Connected Development Enterprises, Hamzat Lawal. Now also joining me from New York is TVC News senior correspondent, Femi Akonde. Femi, let's begin with you. Quite a number of activities lined up for the president as he participates in this year's UNGA. Talk to us about some of these highlights.
Yes, indeed, Ambassador. The president will be meeting with heads of corporate agencies, multinational about businesses, bringing their businesses to Nigeria, and also bringing investments into Nigeria that will create jobs and also add to Nigeria's gross domestic product. Just beyond the flowery speeches that world leaders will be giving at the UN General Assembly, there will also be meetings with other leaders like the president of Brazil, the US president, the president of Cuba, and some other important world leaders. All of these are being lined up in President Bola Tinubu's schedule on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. And we know he would also be participating in the Climate Action Program organized by the UN Secretary General, where President Bola Tinubu also outlined Nigeria's action plan towards climate change and also how Nigeria will walk the talk in achieving the zero emission, joining the global climate action. So all of these events will be starting today, and it's going to be a busy week for President Bola Tinubu.
And President Tinubu seems to be taking this Tinubunomics a notch higher. He will be ringing the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange. Just how significant is this? If you can hear me, Femi, I'm talking about the significance of President Bola Tinubu being the one who would ring the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange. As State House correspondent Femi Akonde for us in New York. If we're able to get him again, we'll talk more about that. But in the meantime, let's bring in Hamzat Lawal, who is CEO Connected Development. Okay, just a quick pause, Hamzat. Back to you, Femi. I was talking about the significance of President Bola Tinubu being the one to ring the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, it's like taking the Tinubunomics a notch higher. All right, Hamzat, I'm curious as to what your expectations are from this year's UNGA as Nigeria participates.
Well, this is historic because this is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's first appearance in the United Nations General Assembly, which he would address world leaders. And I think when you look at the theme that talks about rebuilding trust and also global solidarity, when you look at what's happening around the Sub-African region, particularly the Sahel, with military junta toppling democratically elected government, and the role President Tinubu have played as the chairman of ECOWAS, this speaks about global solidarity. But when you look at rebuilding trust, and for me, a lot of people in Nigeria, their first contact with any form of government is the Nigerian police. And I think that President Tinubu has said, he's committing to internal security. He's committing to ensuring that, the Nigerian police have better welfare, good remuneration, good training, and also increasing the capacity of the Nigerian police. And I think this goes a long way in managing perception and rebuilding trust among government institutions, our political leaders. And when you look at all of this conversation, Goal 17 talks about partnership for the goal. And this is where you and I play a role, because we cannot leave it only for government. And for me as a civil society leader, I'm here to not only observe the commitment of my president and other world leaders, but also to take lessons from this and itemize them and also sensitize the general public on how they can hold our leaders accountable. And the significance of President Tinubu actually ringing the bells helps to change that narrative and public perception. Before the New York meeting, President Tinubu has gone to India. He has gone to UAE. And I think that, this ties to the word that he said that, I asked for the job and hold me accountable to what I do. And this is also changing the narrative and perception about Nigeria, Nigerian leader, and most importantly, the role have people play in global politics and economy that brings prosperity to our dear country.
And on the sidelines of UNGA, we'll be having the Power for Africa conference where President Tinubu, alongside 3 other African leaders, would actually be participating. How significant do you think this would be, considering the pact that some African leaders and nations have with some other parts of the world that are at the moment being faced with some level of criticism?
Well, I think this is key because you see, Nigerian foreign policy is big on, putting Africa first and not aligning to any country who is bringing or causing mayhem to the world. And when you look at the conversation around climate change, Nigeria is committing to zero emission. But then there's that bigger conversation around technology transfer, access to finance, loss and damages, mitigation and adaptation, how we can revitalize, the Lake Chad region and the role Africa and particularly Nigeria play in the global economy, in Africa as the giant of the continent. And I think this is key because when you look at pacts with our partners, country, multilateral, we're currently carrying a debt burden. And I think this is also unique where President Tinubu has an opportunity to work with Madam Amina J. Mohammed, Madam Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, to see how can we get debt relief. How can we take away this debt burden so that Nigeria can then be on the pathway not only to prosperity, but also achieving the sustainable development goal, where President Tinubu will start building his legacy even at the early days of his administration.
And also, I'm wondering what your personal views are about climate change, because already we know about the loss and damage. It's something you referred to earlier. And we know that Nigeria has capacity, for some economic boost. Talk about coal, for instance. But because of our pact to protect the environment and to respect climate change, we seem not to be maximizing that. What do you think, how do you think we should actually approach this issue such that we are not just at the receiving end and not maximizing these mineral resources we've been blessed with?
I think we need to have a robust conversation and dialogue around this whole energy mix. Yes, the world is transitioning to cleaner energy, but I think Nigeria can lead the pathway in the sense that we need to divest and look at what are the opportunities to invest in cleaner technology, one that creates jobs, that protects our environment. But I also think that, and that's why, discussing pacts with our development partners or the various leaders from around the world, if you're saying Nigeria should not explore her coal, why are we not shutting down other coal power plants in Europe, in America, the United Kingdom, and other parts of the world? I take a tour to Europe, for instance. I've been to different coal power plants in Europe in a study I did far back at 2014. Today we only have about 40% of the population connected to the national grid. Over 60%, that's over 120, 30 million people do not have access to electricity. Yes, we have sun. We can invest in solar. We can create jobs and create a big value chain because Nigeria is a big market to ensure that we can roll back on energy poverty. But I think that as a country, we need to reflect. We need to think and agree as a people and also have a transition plan, beyond all the agendas, all the targets that have been set. What is our own target? What is our own agenda? How can we localize this and how can we take ownership of it to ensure prosperity and growth in our country?
Well, questions worth asking, and we hope we'll get answers to. Hamzat Lawal is CEO, Connected Development Enterprises. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Well, thank you for having me.